Okay, Orlando Wilson here. What I want to talk about in this video is a conversation I had recently with, shall we say, a military gentleman. And we were discussing training, various aspects of training, etc. And it came up to me, his problem was, his concerns was for the military in his country, was the training they're being provided was not of a good quality. And the issue is the trainers that's providing the training are not from his country, but they're bringing in training teams from other militaries from other countries, usually NATO countries. The gentleman was saying it's like he wasn't too impressed by the standard of training that was being provided. And I explained to him, well, from my perspective, from my encounters with government training teams and the people they've trained, they're not really interested in providing the top quality training. They're there representing their government. They're most probably there as part of an aid package, or the host government has bought weapons, technology from their country, so they're providing him with the training more as a thank you, or more of a, how can I put it, more of a taster, a teaser. And I said to him, the issue is, and he understood it, he's a wise man, very wise man, and he's like, yeah, they understand they're not getting the top training, they're not getting the training they require to the standard they require, because the NATO training teams don't want foreign governments, especially in developing countries, to have the best training. Why? Because then they won't be dependent on the NATO training teams, etc., if there are problems in the future. So again, it's the same as the perpetual wars that we have going. Back in the day, people fought wars to win wars and end wars. These days, it's to keep going. People manage wars because people make money from wars. And this is the same with a lot of government training teams. They're not there to solve the problem. They're there to manage the training, etc., 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 and not really solve the issue. Where a lot of countries, they want training teams to come in and train their military because they have problems. They want the problem solved because they want peace in their countries. I come across this, I bumped into years ago Peshmerga in Iraq, or Kurdish Peshmerga. And again, they'd gone through some NATO training, and I don't know what the hell they were doing. Those guys, even they were like, they don't know what the hell. They were trying to get them to do drill and basic room clearances, etc. And most of them couldn't even line up the sights on a rifle properly after the training. The same I heard from in the Middle East. Again, if we're going back how many years, a certain Christian militia approached me about training and stuff, and they had the same concern because they had some contact with some of their people, went through some NATO training, and it was a waste of time. Basic, was it Boy Scout? I think the Boy Scouts learn more. Anyway, this is it. A lot of the government training teams are there they're not there to solve the problem, they're there to keep their government's influence. This is, again, you can see this has happened in certain countries in Africa, where recently the French have been told to pack your bags and go. The French military has had a presence in numerous African countries, and recently in the last year, 2023, they've been told to get out. And the complaints I understand is, again, the host governments weren't happy with what the French were doing, which was, they were there apparently to, well, the host governments believed the French were there to help them fight terrorism, help them fight insurgencies, and they weren't doing it. They weren't doing much. Instead of going out and killing bad guys or teaching people how to kill bad guys, they weren't really doing much. I'm sure they had plenty of PowerPoint presentations on LGBTQ rights and gender issues and everything else, but as far as doing their job as soldiers, they weren't really doing it. That's why groups like Wagner, which is, before we go any further, a recognized terrorist organization in the UK and a recognized criminal organization in the United States, organized crime organization in the United States. Wagner went in and they took over a lot of the contracts that the French government had. Why? Because they were actually going in, they're actually going in, and the Russians are going in, they're still there, going in and doing the job that the host government wants, teaching them how to fight terrorism, fighting insurgency, and solving problems. A good example of where contracting companies work, professional military companies work, and I'll touch on that in a second, is Executive Outcomes. Executive Outcomes, Eben Barlow's people after Executive Outcomes, I forget what his new company's called, they done top quality work, first class work. They solved problems very, very efficiently. They did, they provided top quality training and top quality services, and they solved problems and they brought stability. And this is what governments want. They don't want training team, NATO or whoever, training teams to come in and just fluff around. As I said, professional. I've come across, and these days there's how many people going around saying, oh, we're PMC, private military contractors. And from what I see, especially on social media, you know what, guys and girls, it takes more than just dressing up in tactical gear and going to a gun range and playing with guns to become a military contractor. And I'd say the vast majority of the supposed PMCs out there at the moment, well, people portray themselves as PMCs, at best are armed security guard companies, manned by security guards, manned by people that like to get dressed up and go to gun ranges and play with guns. That's it. This is where I see a lot of people putting on their profiles on social media, PMC, etc. You know what? That, when I see that, is a red flag that somebody's a fucking idiot, to put it very, very, very politely. I've come across over the years how many muppets passing themselves off as trainers. And one good example I remember out of South Florida, there was a guy there that had a contract, I think, to work with the police in Costa Rica. And somebody asked me, you mean, could I... somebody I know asked me for some training programs and courses of fire. And I was like, why? Oh, so-and-so's asking for him. And I didn't like the guy anyway. I said, well, fuck him. Period. I'm not helping him. He never helped me. I never liked the guy. He was a very much... yes, he was a security guard, firearms instructor, etc. And we'll leave it there. But I wasn't too impressed with him, period. I never liked the guy. But he apparently had a contract in Costa Rica. And from what I understand and the feedback that got back to me, and I can believe it, he was teaching the police in Costa Rica the G license qualification for Florida security guards. Why? It's all he knew. He couldn't write his own training programs. The guy had no military experience, etc. He was just an NRA firearms instructor, K license instructor. So he'd done the NRA law enforcement firearms training program, which sounds cool, but that's only, I think, a 1 week course maximum, and it's virtually a no-fail course as long as you can shoot straight. So it's not a big deal. And no disrespect, if you look at a lot of the law enforcement qualifications, the basic law enforcement firearms qualifications in the US, they're not that difficult. Why? Because the police need cops on the street, and they're not going to make the firearms qualifications too difficult. So to say you're a law enforcement firearms instructor these days, to me, doesn't really mean much. It doesn't qualify you to pass yourself off as being a private military contractor, instructor, Rambo, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, if you're a government client and you're looking to hire people to come in and actually train your people, make sure they have a past record and make sure they actually know what they're doing, and they're going to provide you with the services that you want. They're not just a glossy web page and glossy social media, but when it comes down to it, they might be able to run around a gun range and do stupid things, but are they going to be able to teach your people actually how to fight an insurgency? And I'd say the vast majority is a no. Or, and again, I know of other companies that are, how can we put it, recommended by embassies to go and do training contracts for foreign governments. Again, it's the same problem as you're dealing with, as I said, the NATO training teams, etc. Those countries, those companies are going to be working to the guidelines given to them by the embassies. And a classic example to finish up, and I spoke to a few guys about this, a few American guys, good guys, and they were involved in training the Iraqi army in the early days. And they said they were getting them up to good speed. The Iraqis were good, and they were pushing them through the training in the early days when the programs first begun. They said, yeah, they were getting really good results. And word come down the line, cut the standards. And the guys are like, what the fuck? Why are we going to cut the standards? The guys were doing a good job. And the word come down the line, as they understood it, is they didn't want the Iraqis trained up to a high standard in case they changed sides, in case the Americans ended up having to fight the Iraqis and the Iraqis were passing on the knowledge to the bad guys, etc. So a lot of guys, from what I understand, a lot of trainers, good trainers, were very disheartened, to put it politely, because they had to tone down the training. And they were saying when ISIS turned up and the Iraqi army collapsed, a few guys I know were like, well, we could have told you that. It's like we weren't allowed to train them to a decent standard. It was all, in the end, the training of the Iraqi army was a farce. And you can see by the results. As I said, ISIS turned up, they capitulated. And apparently they were trained by NATO, America, etc., etc. And the reason they capitulated was they didn't get the sufficient training. The guys, people wanted to give them the training, but they weren't allowed to give them the training. So I'll leave it on that note. So again, as far as government training teams are concerned, I take them with a big pinch of salt. And again, a lot of clientele, if you have government training teams coming in, or government training teams being offered to you, foreign government training teams being offered to you, sure, take it. It's usually free, or your government's paying for it, but take it all with a big pinch of salt. You might learn something, you might pick up something new, but if you're looking for serious training, then find a serious contracting company. Why? A contracting company has to provide you with good results. They have to make your people a lot better. They have to provide what you want, or you know what, they don't get paid. It's a business. Whenever we've provided training to law enforcement, etc., it's in our interest to make sure they're the best they can possibly be, because we want more business, and we want them to go off and spout the word that we provided them with a good quality service, and the people we have dealt with have gone on to get very good results. So just my opinion again on government training teams versus private military training teams, law enforcement training teams, etc. So follow me along on social media. I got a lot more videos up on various topics to talk about security, etc., etc., close protection, kidnap and ransom. I have an array of books on Amazon, and in the near future there'll be another book going up on a tactical guide for law enforcement on counterinsurgency, which I'm working on at the moment. It's been taking me 17 years when I first started it. Long story for another time, but that should be out sometime in the first half of 2024. So in the meantime, be good, stay safe, and stay out of trouble. And whatever training courses you're taking, especially if they're provided by others free of charge, etc., or they're pushed on you, take it all with a pinch of salt, and don't believe everything you're told. And as I say, always take things with a big pinch of salt these days. So in the meantime, be good, stay safe, and try to stay out of trouble.